Chapter 228. Sulen didn't care much about the spread of sugar beet seeds. Even if they got the seeds and successfully grew sugar beets, the juice they extracted from the beets would still be bitter brown sugar. The raw material for sugar in the south was sugarcane, which was very similar to sugarcane in Abel's past life. Those people thought that the reason why Northern Town could mass-produce sugar was because the raw material was different, so they paid a lot of attention to sugar beets. They even sent many people to secretly learn how to grow them. What they didn't know was that the planting technology in Northern Town was based on the influence of the harvest altar. If they followed Northern Town's method to grow sugar beets, the results wouldn't be as good. Sugar beets also took a lot longer to mature than sugarcane, so there was no advantage to growing sugar beets in the south. When the people who grew sugar beets realized that they couldn't produce sugar, and sugar beets matured half a year later than sugarcane, they naturally stopped growing sugar beets. Sulen and Frodo exchanged some spices and seeds. They then divided 10 acres of land for planting. It wasn't that Sulen didn't want to plant spices, but Frodo only had so many seeds. Some of them were not suitable for the climate in the north. Sulen planted pepper, fennel, chili, cumin, and a few other commonly used spices. Star anise, cinnamon, and pepper could only be bought from the south. It was said that the Red Dragon Queen controlled more than 80% of the spice trade. There were a few islands in the south that were filled with spices, and they were called Spice Islands. The spice trade made a lot of money every year, and it made the surrounding countries jealous. They all wanted a piece of the pie, but they were afraid of the Red Dragon Queen's power and her army. A red dragon with the power of an ancient dragon and all kinds of spells could beat a team of legendary wizards by herself. Even the paladins, who claimed to be enemies with evil, would automatically ignore the Red Dragon Queen's existence. In the prime material plane, an ancient dragon that was good at spells was basically the limit of power. Even the avatar of a holy spirit might not be able to defeat her. Sulen was also envious of the Red Dragon Queen. She occupied an important hub of the sea trade and controlled the spice trade. She was also shockingly powerful. She was a winner in a winner in dragon life. The spices planted last year were growing very well. Among them, the chili peppers had already turned red and could be harvested in at most half a month. As for the remaining cumin, it was also growing well. The Sichuan pepper was still a small sapling and would have to wait until at least next year for it to bear fruit. The other spices were growing well as well. In a year or two, Northern Town would be able to produce some spices as well. Although it would not be as good as the Red Dragon Queen's Spice Island, its climate and location were too good. When Sulen was expanding his territory, he had thought of going south. After all, there were many islands in the southern seas. Legend had it that there was even a treasure island. However, all the better islands in the south had already been occupied. With the Red Dragon Queen, a big boss, on top of his head, Sulen felt very insecure. Perhaps with the help of the system, he could finally catch up to the Red Dragon Queen, but that would be a matter of time. To protect the spices from being stolen and destroyed, Sulen built a farm here. He included the spices and 1,000 acres of land in the farm and built a wall to enclose the area. At the same time, he arranged for soldiers to guard the area. Spices were still very expensive. Although they were not sold by the grain, they were not cheaper than white sugar. Among them, the most expensive were pepper and cinnamon. Except for cumin, the spices grown by Sulen were less expensive than them. Sulen planned to continue expanding the spices planting area. He wanted to plant at least 1,000 acres of spices in the entire farm. There was also a lot of wheat planted in the farmland of the Northern Town, which was mainly supplied to Sulen. The rest of the wheat would be sold. After all, many of the caravans here were rich people. Naturally, they would not eat potatoes. Flour was the best choice. The rest of the land was planted with barley, oats, soybeans, and some other grains. Some of them were used to make wine, and some were used to feed livestock. Of course, some were used to extract oil. There were not many kinds of vegetable oil in the world, and the most popular was olive oil. However, the quantity of olive oil was too small and the price was not cheap, so Sulen found a substitute, soybeans. He was going to plant soybeans to extract oil. Besides, soybeans could be used to extract oil and feed livestock. They could also be used to make tofu. Although he had forgotten how to make tofu, he could study it slowly. Perhaps he would be able to taste the tofu pudding from his previous life again. He had not tasted that smooth and refreshing taste in a long time. When that time came, he would have a bowl of sweet and a bowl of salty tofu. He would drink one bowl and pour the other. The number of farmlands in Northern Town increased by the day. Whether it was in his previous life or in this world, food had always been very important. Northern Town had always had a large number of immigrants. A large amount of food was needed to feed these people. After patrolling the farmlands, Su Len went to the academy he had set up to take a look. The academy now was very different from when it was first established. In the beginning, the scholars stayed here because of Sullen's threats. After living here for a while, they realized that other than their personal freedom being restricted, they were treated much better than they were in the northern provinces. Most importantly, Su Len gave them too much money. On average, a scholar would receive 150 kinner per year. In addition to their benefits, which included sugar, rum, flour, tea, and so on, they would receive more than 300 kinner per year. Such good treatment made the scholars, who originally thought that this was a bitter and cold place and were ready to make a fortune, completely overturn their understanding of this place. One had to know that when they were in the northern provinces, although they were nobles, they were mostly just messing around to make a living. Therefore, after getting used to this place, apart from teaching literacy and arithmetic, these scholars began to teach other subjects. Of course, most of the officials who came to study here only learned the basics and left. There were also some who took time to study here. After taking a look at the academy, although it was good enough to teach basic knowledge, there was still a shortage of teachers. Su Len planned to continue hiring scholars at high prices. As for how the merchants managed to convince the scholars to come, he did not care. As long as they came, they would not be allowed to leave until they were taught for a few years. Of course, Su Len would pay them a high salary. In addition to the lack of manpower, the academy also had a shortage of books. They could only rely on the books that the scholars brought with them. Su Len had already sent Xion's merchant group to buy these books. It was estimated that they would be done by the time they returned. Another problem was paper. There was no cheap paper in the academy. The price of a piece of parchment was much higher than that of a piece of sheepskin. These students were still learning how to write using sandboxes and wooden slips. The papermaking workshop in the northern town had been experimenting with making a sturdy, cheap paper that could be used to write smoothly. Su Len heard from them that they had made some progress. The paper they used before was too soft and absorbent, so it could not be used to write at all. After following Sullen's instructions, these craftsmen used several kinds of trees to make paper. After leaving the academy, he went directly to the papermaking workshop. Since the workshop started producing paper, paper had become very popular. After all, not all nobles liked to share the same thick hemp rope or the same wooden stick. As soon as paper was introduced, it was widely praised by the nobles. Since Su Luen built the papermaking workshop last time and produced a batch of paper, the papermaking workshop had expanded a lot after this period of production. The number of craftsmen inside had doubled. Half of them were producing toilet paper, and the rest were experimenting with new materials. The raw material for papermaking had been changed from wood to tree bark. There were also many other materials, such as linen. After a period of experimentation, the craftsmen had divided the papermaking process into several steps. The first step was steaming, which was to cook the raw materials into a paste. The second step was hammering, which was to beat the cooked raw materials repeatedly. Finally, the pulp was made into a pulp, which was then fished out layer by layer. At this time, the paper had already taken shape. As long as it was dried, it would be paper. Although the process looked simple, it was not easy to obtain a piece of paper. After dozens or even hundreds of experiments, the workshop finally made a barely usable paper after changing the bark of various trees and plants in the northern wastelands. This paper used the bark of a common tree in the wastelands as the raw material. It was made with linen and several other materials. In the end, the paper was not pure white. Instead, it was slightly yellow. In his previous life, no one wanted this kind of paper. The color was yellow, the paper was rough, and the paper was somewhat thick. Although there were many shortcomings, The price of this paper was relatively low. Moreover, there were not many problems with writing. It was completely usable. After the papermaking workshop successfully produced this kind of paper, Sulen heard a system notification. Congratulations to the host. The papermaking technique has been successfully broken through. The mastery of papermaking technique has been upgraded. Papermaking technique. Using tree bark, linen, fishing nets, and other materials after steaming, hammering, copying, and drying. Paper that can be used to write. Territory civilization progress +10. Territory culture +10. Learning ability +5. Chapter 229. After the breakthrough in papermaking technology, Sulen immediately began to arrange for people to copy books. If the school in Northern Town wanted to expand, they would need a large number of books. As for printing, the quality of the paper was passable, but printing was not enough. Poor paper quality, printing ink, and so on were all problems. They could only copy by hand. However, this was not a difficult task for the scholars. After all, before printing, they had to copy by hand. After the papermaking workshop produced the paper, half of it was sent to the Lord's castle, and the rest was sent to the school for them to copy books. In the past, books were made on parchment. Generally, books could not write many words, and they were very heavy. The cost was also high. Now that they had changed to paper, the content of a dozen parchment books could be easily written in one book. The first batch of paper was not a lot, but after the first batch was produced, the second batch of paper was produced much faster, and the quantity would increase several times. Most of the paper from the Lord's castle was sent to the city hall for recording and reporting data, as well as various official documents. Northern Town School. After seeing a cart of yellowed paper being sent to the school, the scholars were very curious about this paper. Soon, a steward came forward to hand over the papers. Mori, this is the paper that the Lord asked us to send. Confirm the quantity, then move it back. A middle-aged man came over and said, "Is this the paper that the Lord mentioned?" The man named Mori walked over and picked up a piece of paper. "The Lord asked us to use this paper to copy books. But this paper is much thinner than parchment. If we can really write on it, the content of a book will be several times more than parchment. Why do I feel like this paper is not easy to preserve? Who knows? How can the few of us refuse the Lord's orders? Everyone, this is something that His Lordship has specially sent to the Academy for us to copy the books. Let's just do it. Everyone get moving. First, move these papers down." Mole called out to everyone. With the efforts of the many students, the papers were quickly moved to an empty room. Paper is easily damp. Make sure to keep it dry when storing. After the paper was distributed, the scholars quickly began to use the paper to copy books. While using the paper, the scholars discovered the convenience of the paper. Although the paper was easily damaged compared to the parchment, it was still widely praised by the scholars. Sulen was holding a handwritten copy of a book that had just been completed. The book had been bound according to his requirements, and it was no longer a roll of parchment. The surface of the book was a little rough and looked very simple, but it was much more convenient than the previous sheepskin scroll. "Guards!" Sulen put down his book and shouted at the door. "Sir, what are your orders?" A guard asked respectfully. "Tell Mole that in the future, the books will be made in this style. These books can only be read in the Academy. Without my permission, they are not to be taken out of the Academy and are not to be damaged. Violators will be punished severely. Also, inform Mole to build a library in the Academy specifically to store all kinds of books." "Yes." The guard accepted the order and left. With the appearance of paper, the education in the Academy became much easier. In the past, only the teachers had books, but now almost every student had one. With the books to record, the students' learning speed had increased a lot. After dealing with the matters at the Academy, Sulen began to pay attention to other things. The number of slaves in his territory had been increasing recently, especially after the Harpies arrived. Sulen had asked Alex to lead the Harpies to train their soldiers. They had attacked the goblins, kobolds, gnolls, and orcs in the wilderness. Northern Town City had obtained a large number of slaves. The orcs had suffered heavy casualties in the battle. Even their chief had died in the battle. The remaining orcs had also fallen apart. The centaur tribe that had been half-crippled by the orcs' ambush had joined Northern Town City. The two dominators of the wilderness had suddenly disappeared. Northern Town City no longer had the ability to take over the orcs and centaurs' territories. It had created a temporary vacuum in the wilderness. The smaller tribes in the northern wilderness had begun to migrate here to fill up the empty space. It was a once-in-a-lifetime opportunity for these smaller tribes. In order to fight for the grasslands, plains, and other living spaces, there had been a few tribal wars in the wilderness. Sulen had sent out the army of Northern Town City and the new Harpies to train their soldiers and capture more slaves. Following the military activities of Northern Town City, the number of slaves in the territory soon exceeded 10,000. Most of them were goblins and kobolds, followed by gnolls and orcs. The army of Northern Town City had also suffered losses when they were clearing out the other tribes. The medium-sized tribes had a high chance of producing some spellcasters. The ones that had the highest chance of producing spellcasters were kobold sorcerers. After suffering a few losses, the army of Northern Town City would eliminate any sorcerers or shamans as soon as they found them. Due to the increase in slaves and refugees, Northern Town City's food consumption had increased as well. Luckily, Northern Town City had enough food. With the harvest altar, they did not have to worry about food shortages. After a year of development, Northern Town City had become quite famous in the northern provinces. Many bankrupt farmers and merchants had started to come to the city. The population of Northern Town City had grown rapidly. Excluding the slaves, Mirror Lake City, and Centaur City, Northern Town City now had a population of over 22,000. With sufficient labor resources, Su Luin sped up the construction of the Arc de Triomphe. Because of the construction of the Mirror Lake City and the Centaur City, about half of the slaves had been transferred to the Northern Town City. Now, after a large number of arrests, the number of slaves had skyrocketed, and the construction of the entire Northern Town City had accelerated. The Arc de Triomphe was the second most spectacular building in Northern Town City. It was built to celebrate Sullen's greatness, so it was of utmost importance. White marble was mined from the Sierra de Lotus. They were transported to Northern Town City by camel beasts and polished by stonemasons before they could be used. The pieces of marble were polished until they were smooth and flat. They were then dragged over by slaves. Each piece of marble weighed over a ton. Some of the bigger ones even weighed over 3 tons. The middle gate of the Arc de Triomphe was 10 meters wide. The smaller gates on both sides were 6 meters wide. The Arc de Triomphe was built on Sunrise Street, the main street of Northern Town City. After passing through the Arc de Triomphe, one would reach the central square. The gate was 19 meters tall. After the Arc de Triomphe was completed, it would be the tallest building in Northern Town City, second only to the harvest altar. The inner walls of the gate were carved with lifelike reliefs. These reliefs depicted Sullen's victories against his enemies. From the gnolls to the Cryopterus, the trolls, the orcs, and so on, the many battles. After some artistic embellishment by the master sculptors, even Sulen felt like he was watching an epic. With enough manpower, the construction of the Arc de Triomphe was very fast. Karina and Grace had to cast all kinds of spells to help with the construction. The arched gate of the Arc de Triomphe was very heavy. It was very difficult to move it with the current manpower, but it was just a little troublesome for the wizards. With the help of 2 grade 4 extraordinary warlocks, the marble that weighed at least a few dozen tons was successfully moved up. After the top was covered, the construction of the Arc de Triomphe was more than half done. The rest would require the sculptors to carve the marble. After the marble was placed, Karina and Grace still needed to cast mud to stone to fuse the original pieces of marble into a hole. After the Arc de Triomphe was completed, it would be a hole. After a lot of construction in North Town, a group of skilled sculptors had been cultivated. Sulen specifically asked Hathaway to make some special tools for sculpting stone. These tools could make it easier to carve marble. With the help of these tools, the exterior decoration of the Arc de Triomphe was carved very quickly. After all the carvings were completed, the Arc de Triomphe was also blessed with hardening. Hardening was first used during the Arcane Empire to build the floating space city. The effect of this spell was permanent. When it was cast, even a piece of wood would become as hard as steel. It was said that during the Arcane Empire era, the floating space city's defense could withstand the most powerful prophecy spell, Meteorite Fall, without any damage. After the Arcane Empire disappeared, the wizards had been trying to build a floating space city, but they failed for various reasons. The biggest problem was energy. A powerful energy source was needed to raise a city. Legend had it that every floating space city was powered by a mice energy core, but no wizard had ever found such a thing. Even the manufacturing process of the mice energy core was unknown. After failing to build a floating space city, the wizards took a step back and built a wizard tower. Of course, there were also wizards who built floating space towers. These wizard towers were built with obsidian and were then blessed with hardening. The degree of hardness was very high. In order to prevent the Arc de Triomphe from being damaged, Sulen also blessed it with hardening. It was not a small job. Even Hathaway was brought in to work with him. It took a few days for the Arc de Triomphe to be blessed with hardening. However, the Arc de Triomphe still had one last process to be completed. Sulen went down the stairs in the Arc de Triomphe and entered the interior of the Arc de Triomphe. There was a room inside the Arc de Triomphe which was used to store the Battle Soul Stone. Sulen took the Battle Soul Stone from the storage space. The purple Battle Soul Stone looked very beautiful. Sulen came to the altar in the center of the room. He took a deep breath and placed the Battle Soul Stone on the base of the altar. Chapter 230. The purple Battle Soul Stone was gently placed on the altar. Pa! With a soft sound, the Battle Soul Stone was perfectly embedded. Su Luan took a few steps back, and a magnificent and majestic energy suddenly erupted. There was a faintly discernible sound of fighting. Soon, the sound of fighting gradually disappeared and was replaced by an impassioned battle song. Su Luan seemed to see a majestic army shouting and marching to the battlefield on the beat of drums. A magnificent door appeared above the altar. 2 hero spirits stood quietly at the door. The soldiers who died with Sulen appeared one by one and disappeared into the door. After a while, all the light disappeared and everything returned to normal. The familiar system notification sounded in his ears. Congratulations! You have successfully built a wonder building. The Arc de Triomphe. Arc de Triomphe. This is a building used to praise the victors. Owning this building will make the territory more active. The army values honor and the territory is full of martial spirit. Indestructible plus 50, War God will plus 30, People's martial spirit plus 30, Military enthusiasm plus 30, Battle to the death plus 30, Territory prosperity plus 15, Territory culture plus 10, Army morale plus 30, Enemy deterrence plus 30, Additional skill. Song of Triumph. Song of Triumph. Every time the melody of the Song of Triumph is played, the army's morale will be increased by 50%. The effect lasts for 24 hours. The army's combat power will be increased by 30%. There is a chance to activate the Battle to the Death effect. Battle to the Death. After activating the Battle to the Death effect, the army of the northern battlefront city will be motivated to fight to the last soldier. After activating the Battle to the Death effect, the soldiers' attack will be increased by 30% and their defense will be lowered. After the Arc de Triomphe was completed, a strange energy spread from the building and shrouded the entire city. After the Arc de Triomphe was completed, Sulen prepared a grand celebration. After the celebration, the army in the northern battlefront city became more enthusiastic. However, Sulen did not continue to expand the army. The ratio of the army in the northern battlefront city was already very high. He did not plan to increase the number of soldiers. After finishing the construction of the Arc de Triomphe, Sulen became idle again. He resumed the dodging training that he had stopped for a while. Apart from the daily training, Sulen had been competing with the soybeans during this period of time. The soybeans were harvested, and they had too many uses. Previously, Frodo used animal oil to cook. Although animal oil was good, There was a limited amount of it and some dishes were not suitable to use animal oil. Now that they had soybeans, Sulen specially made an oil press. The style of the oil press was somewhat primitive. It used an ancient screw-type oil press. Like a screw, it slowly squeezed the soybeans into a cake and squeezed out the oil inside. This type of oil press had long been phased out in his previous life. The reason was simple: low oil output, low efficiency, and time-consuming. However, in this world, this type of screw-type oil press was an advanced product. Sulen had seen it a few times when he was young and followed his grandparents to extract oil in the countryside. Although his memory of the past was blurry, he remembered the working principle. With Sulen's mechanical skills, it was not too difficult to make an oil press. After finding a few craftsmen to assist him, Sulen successfully made an oil press in a few days. Oil press. An ordinary oil press. Of course, other than extracting oil, you can also use it to extract juice. You can also call it the juicer. Oil output +8, effort saving +10, durability +10, work efficiency +12 after the juicer. The oil press was made. Su Luen asked someone to bring some soybeans. The soybeans needed to be heated to about 60 degrees Celsius before being poured into the oil press. Sulen did not have a thermometer, so he had to make do with it. After the soybeans were heated until they were a little hot, he asked the workers to work on it. After turning the screw shaft, the machine began to operate. Soon, some clear oil flowed out from the oil outlet. As the screw shaft turned, more and more oil was produced. After a while, it began to reduce gradually. Finally, it stopped completely. When the machine was turned on, the soybeans had been turned into soybean cakes. These soybean cakes could be crushed and used as animal feed. There was no waste at all. Other than the soybean oil, there was also the tofu pudding that Sulen could not forget. In the past, he did not have the means, but now he would not mistreat himself. Although he had forgotten how to make tofu pudding, he still knew how to make tofu. He told the craftsmen how to make tofu pudding and let them try it. To Sulen's surprise, instead of tofu pudding, they made soy milk. The craftsmen did not find a way to solidify the soy milk, and Sulen did not know how to do it. Fortunately, he had heard of a saying, "Brine makes tofu." However, there was another problem. How was he going to make brine? Sulen realized that in his previous life, there were some very simple things that you would not know if you did not understand them. However, brine was supposed to be salty, so Sulen had no choice but to let the craftsmen experiment according to this idea. While the craftsmen were scratching their heads because of Sulen's idea, Sulen began his daily dodging training. After the upgrade, the training ground was even more difficult. After entering the training ground, Sulen felt as if he was carrying a 100-kilogram weight on his back. This was a runic array designed by Hathaway. It could add all kinds of negative statuses to the training, such as weakening, slowing, doubling gravity, and so on. Su Luen couldn't resist it because he had legendary toughness. Moreover, his constitution was very high. If he resisted it, these spells would most likely fail the test of toughness, and the result would be a huge drop in the training results. After various debuffs appeared on his body, he activated the training ground, and arrows shot out rapidly. After the upgrade, the crossbows in the training ground were all added with wind element. In other words, the arrows shot out from the crossbows came with a haste spell. The arrows were very fast. Under normal circumstances, Sulen could easily dodge the arrows with haste. However, there were many debuffs on his body, so his body was obviously much slower. His brain could react, but his body could not dodge in time. For a time, Sulen's figure in the training ground became very difficult. This situation was because the brain had not adapted to the body. However, after dodging for a while, Sulen's control of his body finally improved. Although his speed did not increase, his dodging was not so difficult. After adapting to the training, Sulen began to increase the difficulty. The arrows he used to attack changed from 5 to 7, and there was also a pair of machetes. Sulen was once again in a difficult situation. The difficulty of the training ground increased little by little. After about an hour, the training ended. At this time, Sulen's training clothes were already in tatters. Although Sulen's performance was not bad at the beginning, as the difficulty increased, Another mace would be swung at him as soon as he dodged the axe. Before he could dodge, more than a dozen arrows would block his dodging space. If it were not for his strong constitution, he would have been lying on the ground. However, although he looked miserable, Sulen also gained a lot of benefits. During the training just now, Sulen had turned off the system notification. After the training was over, he checked the system log. Congratulations, host. You have obtained the information of jump dodge after the hard training. Your jump dodge experience has increased. Congratulations, host. You have obtained the information of intuition dodge after the hard training. Your intuition dodge experience has increased. Congratulations, host. You have obtained the information of flexible dodge after the hard training. Your flexible dodge experience has increased. And the last line made his eyes light up. Congratulations, host. Your jump dodge experience is full. You have obtained the talent, jump dodge. Congratulations, host. Your flexible dodge experience is full. You have obtained the talent, flexible dodge. Sulen was a little surprised to get 2 dodges at one time, but it was a pity that he did not get intuition dodge. Intuition dodge could be said to be the strongest among the basic dodges. After mastering intuition dodge, it was just like the literal meaning. He did not need to see it with his eyes and could only rely on his intuition to dodge. This talent was also the most difficult to get among the basic dodges. After intuition dodge, there was proficiency in intuition dodge. It was even more difficult to get this talent. Even if there were powerful rogues, there were very few who could master this talent. This kind of person had a very strong intuition for danger, and it was also very difficult to sneak attack them. Of course, proficiency in intuition dodge was not the most powerful talent. After entering the realm of legends, some people would get the sixth sense talent similar to supernatural powers. This talent was a bug. It seemed to have some ability to predict the future. It was said that the gods generally had the sixth sense talent. As for the more advanced super sixth sense, this was already a legendary talent. People who had this talent could be regarded as little experts and dare to venture into all kinds of dangerous areas. However, this talent could not be obtained through postnatal training. Even the upper-level sixth sense talent was innate or naturally awakened after entering the realm of legends. After going through various commandments and completing many practices, it was possible to further strengthen the sixth sense talent. For other professions, it was completely dependent on luck. Sulen did not think that far yet. He now wanted to max out his basic dodges and get proficiency in intuition dodge. Although it was still not as good as the sixth sense talent as a legendary powerhouse, it was almost enough. After all, he was not a rogue. He basically relied on dodging to survive. Although he did not have the sixth sense talent, he had the legendary battle reflex. Coupled with parry, the effect was not bad. Chapter 231. After the Arc de Triomphe in Northern Town City was completed, many workers and slaves were free. As a black-hearted capitalist and an evil slave owner, there was no way he would let his workers rest. The next day, he announced the construction plan for the city. The first thing he needed to do was to upgrade the granary. The granary in Northern Town was very simple and crude. After all, they did not have a lot of food. However, due to the harvest altar, the food production had skyrocketed. Northern Town's granary was now full. In order to preserve the food, some of the granaries were taken out for storage. However, they could only be stored temporarily. After all, potatoes were not easy to preserve. Without a professional granary, the potatoes would sprout easily. Potatoes were different from other crops. The sprouted potatoes were poisonous. Once they sprouted, they would be inedible. The granaries in North Town City were built underground. The space above ground only took up a third or even less. This kind of underground granary had a low internal temperature, which made it easier to preserve the food. Since it was located in the underground, even if a fire broke out, only the top layer of the food would be burned down. The food buried in the underground would be fine. Sulen attached great importance to the granaries. He specifically found an official from the basic level to be in charge of the granaries. He also set up a strict management and inspection system. He did not want a fire dragon to burn the granaries, or soldiers from the dead to borrow food, like in ancient times. The granaries in northern town were built in the northwest, close to the Red Sand River. The aqueduct was close, too. Once a fire broke out, it would be solved in the shortest time possible. A granary could store around 10 tons of food. Sulen planned to build 20 to 30 granaries. The food they stored would be enough to feed northern town for 3 years. These granaries were the reserve granaries. They would not be used under normal circumstances to prevent wars and other disasters. Apart from the strategic reserve granary, northern town also had a normal granary. This granary was used to provide food for northern town. As for the strategic reserve granary, it would not be used unless it was purchased at a low price. Even if the food became moldy after a long time, it would be sent to the winery to be brewed. With 1,000 craftsmen and even more slaves, the granaries in the North Town city were built very quickly. A standard granary had a diameter of 8 meters and a depth of 6 meters. The granary was located in a relatively high area in the North Town city. The ground was dry and hard, and there was a layer of bricks inside the granary. The bricks were covered with chaff and hay to prevent moisture. In order to build this granary, Su Luan had read a lot of information and asked those experienced craftsmen. Then he started the construction. After all the granaries were excavated, they were dried with firewood. The next step of construction was not started until there was no more moisture. The interior of the granary was paved with a layer of bricks. The sand from the Red Sand River was washed, dried, and placed into the granary. Together with the chaff and hay, the granary took 7 days from start to finish. When the last door was put in, the granary was considered complete. Excellent granary. Indestructible plus 23, durability plus 24, fire plus 28, moisture resistance plus 26, insect and rat repellent plus 25, mildew reduction plus 25. As it turned out, Sulen's granary was quite good. All the granaries in the future were built according to this model. After establishing the standard, Su Luan asked the craftsman to build according to this standard. Then he went to Hathaway's laboratory. The books and materials he got from the necromancer last time had been given to Hathaway, along with some potions he got from the necromancer. Today, Hathaway informed him that those potions had been identified. He went to Hathaway's lab. Now, Hathaway's lab was several times bigger than before. The functions inside were more complete. When Sulen came in, a clay golem opened the door for him. Hathaway's lab was no longer the same as before. There were 6 clay golems alone. These golems were in charge of all kinds of basic work in the lab. Sometimes they would also help Hathaway with some dangerous experiments. Hathaway, have these potions been identified? Sulen looked at the various bottles on the test bench next to him and asked. These bottles were no different from when Sulen sent them. Yes. Hathaway nodded gently. She didn't raise her head. She was holding a carving knife in her hand and was carving a dragon skin armor. A mysterious runic array quickly formed in her hand. Then Hathaway snapped her fingers. All kinds of materials that had been mixed flew out of the box next to her. These materials quickly fused under the control of magic. Then, as if they had a life of their own, they fused into the dragon skin armor that had been completely engraved with runes. The aura dissipated, and the runes shone brightly. Then, the brilliance faded, and the dragon skin armor returned to its previous ordinary appearance. Strong Gale Dragon Skin Armor plus 3. Indestructible plus 10. Light and Flexible plus 8. Spell Resistance plus 10. Acid Resistance plus 10. Spells. Haste, Bull Strength. Once a day. Additional effect. Deterrence. Originated from the innate ability of dragons. Although your own creatures don't have a powerful dragon deterrence like a real dragon, their majesty is still a great deterrence to lower creatures. When the dragon skin armor was made, part of the Euron's deterrence effect was retained. There was a chance to scare away unsteady enemies. There was a chance to cause a deterrence test to the enemy during battle. The enemy would have to undergo a will test. Seeing this dragonskin armor, Su Luan was also a little surprised. Hathaway's skills were getting more and more exquisite. This dragonskin armor could be said to be the best among all the dragonskin armors she made. After putting away the tools, Hathaway picked up the black tea next to her and took a sip. Then she said, "The potions you got from the necromancer are not simple. I was shocked when I identified them." "Really? Could it be that those potions can greatly increase one's strength after taking them?" Sullen's eyes lit up. Hathaway rolled her eyes and looked at him as if he was an idiot. "Do you think that necromancer would not use those potions himself and run around with them? Maybe his brain had a cramp." Su Len pursed his lips. Although he knew that the probability was very low, it didn't stop him from imagining it. Hathaway ignored him. Instead, she took out a piece of paper and said, "This is the identification result and how to use all the potions you brought back. Take a look yourself. I still have to study how to improve the rock golems." "How to improve the rock golems? You should make one to practice first and then improve it." Su Len took the identification result and flipped through it. Manticore venom. Venom collected from the venom sac in the manticore's body. Highly toxic. At the same time, it has the effects of paralysis, severe pain, and confusion. Corpse oil. Fat extracted from corpses. Can be used to summon undead creatures to increase the success rate of summoning. Poisonous. Corpse poison potion. Corpse poison potion made from a variety of poisons. It can be used to add poison attacks to the undead. Can also be smeared on weapons. Those infected by corpse poison will slowly die if they don't have a cure potion or a priest's divine spell to dispel the poison. Explosive potion. After use, it can cause an explosion with a diameter of 15 meters. The strength of the explosion is 30 degrees. The strength of the explosion of the fireball spell is 15 degrees. Corruption potion. After use, it will cause a corruption effect. If the constitution fails to resist, the body will rot in a short period of time. Petrification potion. A potion made from the heart of a petrifying lizard and other materials. After use, it will enter a petrified state. If the petrified state is not removed within 2 hours, it will completely turn into stone. Plague potion. After use, it will release a green plague. The plague will pollute water sources, kill trees and animals, and finally create a plague. People or other humanoid creatures infected by the plague will be resurrected as low-level undead. With enough plague potion, it can even transform an area into a plague zone. Sullen's heart couldn't help but twitch when he saw the plague potion. Sure enough, these undead wizards were terrorists. They even brought this kind of destructive weapon with them. If this thing was used in a densely populated city, it wouldn't take long for the whole city to become a ghost town if it wasn't discovered or dealt with in time. It was like a fantasy version of a biological weapon. After seeing the potion, Su Len also remembered who this undead wizard called Keaton was. This guy was the plague bane of the Aubrey's kingdom. The biggest thing he did was to use this plague potion to destroy a small city. This potion was Keaton's secret recipe. It was also because of this potion that Keaton became famous. There were more than 20,000 people in that small city. This was the most outrageous thing that an undead wizard had done in the past 200 years. Later on, this guy even wanted to create an undead calamity. However, he didn't think about it. With the suppression of the gods, those who dared to do so were basically dead. Later on, Keaton was defeated by the combined forces of the Aubrey's kingdom and the temple. This guy was lucky enough to escape. The Aubrey's kingdom put a bounty of 500,000 kinner on his head. Who would have thought that he was hiding in the underworld? This price was already very high. After all, the Red Dragon Queen's head was secretly offering only 5 million, but no one was willing to do it. The risk and reward were completely disproportionate. The Red Dragon Queen controlled the Golden Sea route and the spice trade. Her annual income was more than that. Those people were offering too little. Sullen's heart ached when he thought about how Keaton's body had been destroyed by the plague potion. 500,000 gold coins flew away from his hands just like that. Even if he used Keaton's equipment to prove that he was the one who killed Keaton, the Aubrey Kingdom would still believe him. However, he wouldn't be able to get a single gold coin because the Aubrey Kingdom wouldn't pay him without Keaton's head. Chapter 232. Sulen didn't feel good about missing out on 500,000 kinner. If he knew Keaton's head was so expensive, he would have left him with a whole body. Too bad it was too late. The potions in front of him weren't very useful. He was going to destroy the disgusting stuff like corpse oil. The other poisons were pretty good. As for the plague potion, Sulen hesitated for a bit and decided to keep it. It could be used on the enemy. As a matter of fact, if the plague potion was discovered in time, it wouldn't be easy to destroy a city. As long as there were priests and wizards who could purify, dispel, or detoxify the poison, it could be dealt with. It was a surprise attack. The explosive potion was pretty good too. It had a large area of effect and was very powerful. If it could be mass-produced, it would be invincible on the battlefield. It was much more powerful than grenades. If he could get the secret recipe and build a grenadier squad, he would be invincible on the battlefield. Or, he could ask the harpies to carry the potion and bombard the target with carpet bombing. The effect would be enough to flatten a city. Sulen picked up a bottle of explosive potion and asked, "Hathaway, can you derive the recipe for the explosive potion?" "The recipe for the explosive potion? That's a bit difficult. I'm not sure how long it will take," Hathaway replied as she flipped through the book. "But the cost of this explosive potion isn't cheap. You'll have to be prepared if you want to mass-produce it." "Don't worry, it's just money. Northern Battlefront City is full of money now," Sulen said generously. After annexing Orlando, the Grey Dwarf, Northern Battlefront City had more than 10 million kinner residents. On top of that, they were earning a few 100,000 every month. It wouldn't be a problem for them to buy a duchy. "Alright, I'll do it. But I suggest you recruit a few alchemists and wizards. I have too much work to do right now, and my time is limited," Hathaway said. Sulen looked at Hathaway's lab and nodded. "You do need to recruit more alchemists and wizards. It's just that Northern Battlefront City is too secluded right now. It's not well known among wizards. I'm afraid it's going to be hard to recruit wizards," Sulen said with a headache. Although the Northern Citadel was developing well, there weren't many people who came to join. Even though scholars were forced by Sulen. "Do you have any good suggestions?" "Most wizards are short on money. Hire them with money." Hathaway felt a little helpless. Many wizards were otakus. If they were not doing experiments, they were doing research or they were meditating and practicing spells. The only reason they were willing to serve the nobles was money. "Alright, that's all we can do." Sulen felt a little helpless. In fact, he had something that could attract a large number of wizards, and that was mithril. As long as he spread the word, a large number of wizards would come knocking on his door in less than a month. However, if that happened, Sulen might not even be able to keep his silver mine. "Then I'll go first." Sulen put away the potion and was ready to leave. "Wait, I'm going to make a stone golem. Can you help me?" Hathaway said. Sulen had experienced the power of a stone golem in the trial space before. Each one of them weighed a few tons and had thick skin. Although they were a little slow and had no magic attacks, they were still very useful on the battlefield. Otherwise, wizards wouldn't have made them into a regular army. As for the stronger steel golems, Hathaway still couldn't make one. They required a large amount of soul crystals to be activated. Sulen only had a few pieces, and they were obtained from killing the necromancer Keaton. If he wanted a large amount of soul crystals, he had to cultivate them himself. The other way was to go to the bottomless abyss. Cultivating them himself was too bloody, and Sulen didn't consider it. This kind of thing was only done by some wizards during the Witch King era. Later, the Witch King era disappeared, and this kind of thing was listed as a taboo. Now, the only way he could think of to get a large amount of large soul crystals was to go to the bottomless abyss. As long as it was an elite-level demon, one could obtain a large piece of soul crystal after killing it. If one killed a high-grade demon, one could obtain a legendary-level soul crystal and even the divine power of the demon. Of course, it was very difficult to do so. The Arcane Kingdom once invaded the Abyss, and those powerful arcanists drove the floating space city into the abyss. It caused the fall of several abyss demons. It was also in those wars that the gods began to fear the power of the arcanists. As for cultivating large soul crystals, this kind of thing was the devil's forte. They would lure greedy people through contracts, and then use various methods to lure the contractor to fall and set up various traps. It was said that after suffering, there was even a chance to get a legendary soul crystal. Of course, this statement had not been confirmed. However, the devil lured people to fall, let them be immersed in their own desires, and then harvest their souls. The probability of getting a high-quality soul crystal was very high. It was said that the method of cultivating soul crystals during the Witch King era was learned from the devil. There were many materials for the rock golem, from the general granite golem to the top obsidian golem. The difficulty of construction was different, and the price was also very different. An ordinary rock golem cost 50,000 to 60,000 kinner, while an obsidian golem cost almost 100,000 kinner. The obsidian golem's magic resistance and physical resistance were not comparable to the general rock golem. In terms of magic defense, even the steel golem was not as good as it. The rock golem that Hathaway built was an ordinary granite golem, and the soul core only needed a medium-sized soul crystal. Sulen had more than 30 of this level of soul crystals, all of which were contributed by the necromancer. Speaking of which, this necromancer was really a good person. Not only did he give them EXP and equipment, but he also gave them books, knowledge, and materials. He was simply the captain of the transport team. The materials for the rock golem were now available in the northern battlefront city. The high-quality granite was directly sent to the quarry, and then the carvers would carve it. The process of making a rock golem was not too complicated, and it was not too difficult for the two who already had experience in making clay golems. The creation of the rock golem could be divided into 3 parts. The first part was the construction of the body parts. This step could be done by taking them apart. Fortunately, the northern battlefront city had a large number of carvers, and Sulen was relieved to let them carve it. The second part was the assembly of the body parts. This step was like piecing together a toy model, completely piecing the rock golem together. Of course, when piecing together, they had to pay attention to the runic array inside the rock golem. The third part was the casting and activation. This part required Hathaway to cast the spell. She had to activate the soul center of the rock golem, and at the same time she had to activate the life construct. In fact, Sulen had considered whether he could set up a production line for rock golems in the future. As long as the production line was started, he could mass-produce rock golems like an assembly line. He was not the first to have this idea. In the era of the floating city, in addition to a large number of wizards living in each floating city, there were also a large number of rock golem legions. These rock golem legions were produced using the assembly line method. This was also why the arcanists in the era of the Arcane Empire could rely on the rock golem legions to beat the demons who had always relied on the human wave tactic to the ground. After all, the birth rate of demons really could not keep up with the production rate of rock golems. A rock golem was about 3 meters tall and needed about 3,000 pounds of rock. After carving, the weight would be slightly reduced. Of course, there were also some large rock golems that weighed up to several tons. The main craft of making a rock golem was carving, and it required the use of magic essential oils and runic matrices. The carving craftsman would solve the problem of carving. As for the runic matrices, they needed Hathaway to carve them. After carving the runes, they also needed to use gemstone powder, magic alloy, and other materials to completely integrate them into the body of the rock golem. This step was also very important. Gemstone powder and magic alloy could be said to be the most expensive things in the rock golem, apart from the soul crystals. Sulen optimized and modified some parts of the rock golem according to the principles of mechanical control. Finally, the rock golem was assembled. After the assembly was completed, it needed to be activated with the soul crystals and cast the spell to activate the life of the construct. Although all this was very simple, Sulen and Hathaway were busy for 5 days to make a rock golem. The two of them went back and forth between the Lord's castle and the laboratory almost every day. It took 3 days just to carve the runes and improve and optimize the energy transmission system, and 2 days to carve and assemble. The carving of each part of the rock golem was done strictly according to the dimensions given by Sulen. The head, torso, and limbs were all made separately. The advantage of this was that even if the carving was broken, it was easy to replace. All the parts of the rock golem were made into standard parts, and it was more convenient to assemble the rock golem. After the parts were made into standard parts, it was very easy to repair the rock golem. If a part was broken, it could be replaced directly. As long as the soul core was not damaged, the rock golem would not die. This was also the preparation that Sulen made in advance to try to build a rock golem factory in the future. After the final assembly was completed, Hathaway took a medium-sized soul crystal and began to activate the rock golem. She also cast the spell to activate the life of the construct. Sulen had not figured out how to replace these steps. If he could not solve this problem, the rock golem factory in Northern Town would need a group of wizards who specialized in activating rock golems. Powerful elemental energy burst out from Hathaway's body, followed by a throbbing of the soul. The soul crystal turned into a purple soul energy and merged with the rock golem's body in an instant, and finally calmed down. At the same time, the rock golem moved in an instant. Ding! The host has participated in the production of rock golems. You have obtained more information on magic technology. Your magic technology experience has increased. Chapter 233, Northern Wasteland. It was already midsummer. Even though Northern Wasteland City was located in the north of the continent, the weather was still very hot. Sulen was lying in his room with 2 small wind elementals acting as electric fans. The wind blew gently, and there was a fruit platter on the table next to him. There were all kinds of fresh and juicy fruits on the fruit platter. Just looking at them was enough to whet one's appetite. Sulen was lying in a rocking chair. The 2 maids, Angela and Annie, were massaging his calves and shoulders. Chris was sitting at the side. She picked up a tender cherry and put it in her mouth before feeding it to Sulen. Sulen opened his mouth and ate the cherry. He hugged Chris and took a bite. This was what life was like. Northern Wasteland City had been developing well recently. It was also because of this that Sulen had the time to enjoy the luxurious life of a feudal noble. My lord, there's an urgent military situation. Just as Sulen was enjoying his luxurious life, a guard reported from outside the door. Come in, Sulen said lazily. Angela and Annie's massage was too comfortable. His entire body felt soft and relaxed. My lord, there's a large-scale battle in the Sierra de Lotus in the north. It's speculated that both sides are powerful magic beasts. Have you confirmed what kind of magic beasts it is? Sulen asked. The reconnaissance team has already sent people to investigate. There's no news so far. I see. Sulen waved his hand. There had been a few news reports about high-level magic beasts recently. Sulen was also curious. After this year, the high-level magic beasts in the Northern Wasteland seemed to have entered the active period. Under normal circumstances, high-ranked magic beasts had their own territories. They would divide their territories, and under normal circumstances, these high-ranked magic beasts wouldn't easily leave their territories. But now, there were continuous fights between high-ranked magic beasts. Aside from this, when Sulen was building Mirror Lake City, he discovered that it wasn't just magic beasts. Even wild beasts were becoming restless. Winter wolves rarely appeared in the northern city, but there were 5 of them last time. Even the patrolling army often reported that there were wild beasts attacking the territory. This was very unusual in Sullen's eyes. Under normal circumstances, wild beasts would not attack humans, especially human armies. Under normal circumstances, those wild beasts would avoid human armies. Things like this rarely happened unless there was a lack of food in the winter. The starving wild beasts had no other choice but to attack the territory to obtain food. It was summer now, the time when the plants in the northern wasteland were the most lush. The water and grass were abundant, and wild beasts were multiplying. It was the time of the year when food was the most abundant. During this time, wild beasts would not provoke humans. But now, there were wild beasts attacking human territory. Sulen thought for a while, but couldn't figure it out. He was a bit annoyed. After saying goodbye to Hathaway, Sulen went to the lab to find Hathaway. If there was anyone in the territory who had the most knowledge, it would probably be Hathaway. Karina and Grace were a bit behind. When he arrived at the lab, Hathaway was drawing on the lab table. Sulen glanced at the drawings. There were stone golems of different sizes on the drawings. These stone golems had been separated into different parts. At the same time, the composition and runes on them were a bit different. At the same time, there were some golems that Sulen had never seen before. They should be the ones recorded in the book that Sulen obtained from the necromancer. What kind of golems are these? Sulen asked curiously. The golems on the drawings were very different from the stone golems. They didn't have the heavy feeling of the stone golems. On the contrary, they had smooth lines and looked very agile. Their hands were sharp claws, and they also had a pair of wings. These are gargoyle golems, Hathaway explained. This kind of golem is a variant of the rock golem. Unlike ordinary golems, gargoyle golems have the ability to fly and don't have the weakness of ordinary rock golems. Gargoyles move very quickly. They can fly? Sulen asked in surprise. Yes, they are flying golems. Hathaway nodded. And these golems are very different from the stone golems. Normal stone golems aren't made as professional combat units. The stone golems made by wizards are multi-purpose golems. They can help their masters with their work, and they can also fight in critical moments. These gargoyle golems are different. They are completely made for combat, so they are called battle golems. Battle golems? How are they fighting? Sulen asked with great interest. Not bad. Their attack power is close to that of the stone golems, but their defense is a little lower. If they fight with the stone golems, they can't do anything to each other. If they fight with the obsidian golems, the gargoyle golems are no match for them. However, these golems were designed to fight against air units. After hearing Hathaway's explanation, Sulen also understood the characteristics of these gargoyle golems. First, they were more expensive than stone golems but less expensive than obsidian golems. Second, the gargoyle golems had decent attack power and low energy consumption, which was only consumed when they were activated. The dormant gargoyle was like a normal stone golem, so it didn't consume any energy. Third, they could fight against air units, which was the original intention of the gargoyle golems. Ordinary golems, from clay golems to stone golems to steel golems, basically didn't have the ability to fight against air units. They could only do so after special modifications. The gargoyle golems were specifically designed to deal with air units. Most wizard schools had the technology to create ordinary golems, but after the modification of the basic golems, there was a big difference. Each school had their own technology to create golems. For example, the armor golem looked like a knight's plate armor. It was flexible and fast, and its cost was lower than that of the stone golems. There was also the skeleton golem, which cost even less. The gargoyle golem was a special type of golem in the necromancer school. The cost of this golem was only half of the obsidian golem, and it also used some knowledge of the necromancer. Because it used obsidian as its main body, the gargoyle golem had high magic and physical resistance. We have the harpies now, so we don't need the gargoyle golems for the time being, but they can be used as a technical reserve, Sulen said after thinking for a moment. I know. I only plan to make a few and put them on the roof of the castle. Once someone invades from above, they will wake up and attack immediately, Hathaway said with a nod. By the way, why did you come to see me this time? Hathaway asked. Sulen said with dissatisfaction. Can't I just come to see you? Haha. Hathaway rolled her eyes at Sulen. Okay. I admit that I came to see you about something, but it was just in passing. I came to see you specifically, Sulen emphasized. Hathaway looked at Sulen without saying anything. Her expression was as if to say, Do you think I'll believe you? Scumbag. Something happened in the territory recently. I want to ask if you know the reason. Sulen pretended not to see her expression and changed the topic. What's the problem? Hathaway asked. There have been a lot of wild beasts attacking the army and slaves in the territory recently. Now is not the winter season when there is a lack of food, so they shouldn't be in such a situation. Also, the soldiers of the reconnaissance camp have reported that they have found several high-grade magical beasts fighting. I feel that something is not right in the wasteland recently, Sulen said with confusion. Something is not right. Hathaway nodded and said, maybe you didn't notice it because you're not a wizard, but I noticed that the concentration of elements in Northgard City is slowly increasing. The elemental energy is also a bit chaotic. I think there's a connection between these things. What connection? I wonder if you've heard of the elemental tide? Hathaway asked as she took off her spectacles. Sulen frowned and said, elemental tide? What's that? The elemental tide is a term for the periodic changes in elemental energy discovered by wizards. It involves a lot of advanced knowledge, and it's hard to understand without systematic study. Hathaway looked at Sulen with an expression that said, you're stupid. I can't explain it to you. The veins on Sulen's forehead twitched. Tell me about it. Su Luen resisted the urge to spank her and said, all right. Hathaway shrugged and continued, you should know that the place we're living in is called a plane in wizard theory. There are many planes like this in the multiverse. Some planes are flat, wrapped in a layer of membrane to protect them. Some planes are planets and some are half-planes and so on. All of these planes were first born in the origin sea. Some people call it the ether. The origin sea is boundless. It's filled with the most primitive energy. All the energy in the multiverse comes from the origin sea. In other words, the elemental energy around us originated from the origin sea. As for the elemental tide, let's make a simple analogy. Think of the origin sea as a vast ocean. This ocean is constantly moving. You should know that the ocean has its own ebb and flow. These are all natural phenomena. So, the origin sea is an ocean of energy. It has its own ebb and flow, and this energy ebb and flow is called the elemental tide by wizards. Normally, the sea level will only rise after the ebb and flood the coast. However, the elemental tide is different. It's energy that rises. The rise of energy in the origin sea will directly lead to the rise of energy in the multiverse. Chapter 234. So in the multiverse, there will be an increase or decrease in the concentration of elements. At the same time, the distribution of the energy is not uniform. Some planes have high elemental energy, and some planes have low elemental energy. Some planes that are about to reach their end will gradually die. You're saying that our world is experiencing an elemental tide? Sulen asked. Not so stupid, Hathaway praised, looking like a child that could be taught. Sulen looked at the little witch with his spear. The elemental tide cycle is very long. Half of the time it's 500 to 800 years. Sometimes it can even last for thousands of years. The time is not fixed. If it lasts for so long, how can you be sure that it's caused by the elemental tide? Sulen was a little curious. And it's only happening to beasts and high-level magical beasts. Why doesn't it happen to humans? Hathaway looked at Sulen with a look of disdain. As early as a few decades ago, the wizards predicted that the elemental tide was about to start. After all, it's been a few hundred years since the last elemental tide. As for the beasts and magical beasts, it's because they are more sensitive to elements than humans. Many beasts may look like normal beasts, but who knows if they have the blood of magical beasts. These beasts can easily mutate during the elemental tide and evolve into magical beasts. Magical beasts are born to control elements. In terms of their sensitivity to elements, even wizards can't compare. Didn't you learn a domain? Open your domain and feel the changes in the elemental energy in your domain. You should find something. Sulen nodded, then slowly closed his eyes and activated his lightning domain. He did not move the elemental energy around him. Instead, Sulen opened up his huge spiritual network and began to feel the elemental energy around him. Soon, he found that the elemental energy around him was a little different. The elemental energy in the outside world was a lot denser today, and it was very active. He could also clearly feel that the consumption of energy when he used his domain had decreased. There are many benefits to the elemental tide. For example, it will make it easier for wizards to cast spells, and the number of ordinary people with the potential to become a wizard will also increase. Other than these benefits, the disadvantage is that the magic beasts will become more powerful, and their numbers will also increase. The elemental tide is fair to everyone, including magical beasts. The requirement to become a wizard was very high. If he wanted to become a wizard, he had to have at least 18 points of spirit. Of course, as a child with the potential to become a wizard, their will would need to reach at least 12 points. Then, according to the training method of wizard apprentices, their will would reach 18 points when they reached adulthood. Under normal circumstances, the apprentice would be trained between the ages of 8 to 14. Only those who had a will of 12 points would have the opportunity to become a wizard. It was said that during the period of the Arcane Empire, the arcanists had a magical weave. As long as one's mental strength reached 15 points when they reached adulthood, they could become an arcanist. The magic net greatly reduced the threshold for becoming an arcanist, which led to the number of arcanists in the Arcane Empire being 100 times more than the current wizards. The huge number of arcanists created the glorious civilization of the Arcane Empire. Sulen slowly opened his eyes. Just now, he had felt the difference in the world. The elements had become more active, and the difficulty of casting spells had decreased. This meant that more wizards would appear, and at the same time the world would change. The most obvious change at the beginning of the elemental tide was the increase in the number of powerful beings. The original old pattern would definitely be broken. Even many powerful creatures active in the last era would awaken. Some powerful creatures would fall into a deep slumber or leave the prime material plane for the astral plane due to the weakening of the elemental concentration. The main material world would make them feel uncomfortable, and the stronger the creature, the more obvious it would be. The increase in strength would definitely breed more ambition. They would be dissatisfied with the old order and want to gain more benefits. Then the only way was to fight. Sulen could already foresee that there would be endless wars on the continent in the future. Sulen was not worried about the upcoming challenges. The elemental tide gave everyone an experience buff, not just some people. With the system, he was confident that he would become stronger and stronger. In the quiet night, everything returned to normal. In the summer night, there was still a dry heat in the air. There were sounds of insects outside. In the room in the Lord's castle, Sulen did not sleep after the battle. After knowing that the elemental tide was coming, he felt a sense of urgency. In the Sage era, his mind was the clearest. In the end, Sulen gave up. The elemental tide was not something that could be changed by human power. The only thing he could do was to make himself stronger. He could not change the changes in the world, so he had to occupy an advantageous position in this change. After thinking it through, Sulen no longer hesitated. He hugged the soft body beside him and found a comfortable position to fall asleep. When he woke up the next day, Sulen felt refreshed. Hathaway and Alex had not woken up yet. The little succubus Chris had already left. Sulen got dressed under the care of Angela and Annie. After getting used to the feudal aristocratic life of being served by others, it felt great. After a simple breakfast, Sulen did some simple exercises. Then he started his work for the day. During this time, the summer grain had started to mature. The wheat planted in the northern city could be harvested. A portion of the wheat would be sent to the city lord's castle. The other portion would be sold. In addition to purchasing the summer grain, Sulen went to the military camp. During this time, the army in the northern city did not engage in any large-scale battles. However, there were continuous small-scale battles. Some of the spearmen had finally been promoted to the spear guard. Now, there were only 2 formation breaker soldiers in the northern city. If he wanted to obtain more soldiers, he would need a large number of spear guard soldiers to undergo training. The training method of the formation breaker soldiers was crueler than that of the spear guard soldiers. After a period of training, they would be arranged to try to advance. If Sulen could recruit 700 formation breaker soldiers, He could completely rely on the formation breaker to defeat the orc army like the last time he encountered the orc invasion. Now, the strength of the soldiers in the northern city had begun to develop into a high-end combat force. With the beginning of the elemental tide, the enemies they would encounter in the future would become stronger and stronger. In the face of such enemies, the effect of ordinary soldiers was infinitely close to zero. Moreover, the population of the northern city limited Sullen's ability to use the human wave tactic. Since he could not gain an advantage in numbers, he could only crush them in terms of quality. As long as he had enough time, Sulen was confident that he could obtain more spear guard soldiers and formation breaker soldiers. However, while Sulen was training, more and more attacks began to occur in the territory. In order to ensure the safety of the territory, Sulen began to send more people to the territory. At the same time, he took the initiative to eliminate the potential dangers around the territory. In order to let more spear guards become spear guards, Sulen personally led the spear guards to clear out all kinds of monsters. The Thorn Forest was the name Sulen gave to the area because there were a lot of low shrubs growing in the forest. According to the scouts, there seemed to be magic beasts appearing here. In fact, the stronger a beast was, the faster it would evolve into a magic beast. On the contrary, the weaker a beast was, the faster it would evolve into a magic beast. Of course, the potential between the two was different. The soldiers were wearing armor and wielding swords, cutting a path in the Thorn Forest. The danger level of this area had increased. In fact, even the weakest magic beast was very dangerous. The lowest challenge level of a magic beast was level 9, which was equivalent to the peak of a Grand Knight. It was only one step away from becoming a Knight Commander. The sun was rising, and the weather was getting hotter. The soldiers were wearing heavy armor, and they were all sweating under the sun. The armor was airtight. Sulen looked at the sun and said, "Stop advancing. Set up camp here and rest. Be careful of the danger. Also, make a fire and cook. Continue searching in the afternoon." "Yes, sir." The soldiers breathed a sigh of relief and began to find a cool place to rest. Although they were resting, none of the soldiers took off their armor. Even their weapons were placed where they could easily reach. They were ready to fight at any time. On the other side, some of the soldiers began to set up camp. According to the requirements, even if it was a temporary camp, it had to be protected. This was a special requirement in the training of the Northern Town Army. Fortunately, they had brought a lot of tools, so they set up camp quickly. Some of them set up camp, while others began to collect firewood, cut trees, and dig up some wild vegetables and mushrooms. Many of the soldiers in the Northern Town Army had undergone wilderness survival training. After all, the barbarians lived in the wilderness all year round. They had a lot of wilderness survival skills. Although they couldn't read and couldn't even write their own names, they were like fish in water in the wilderness. They didn't have to worry about starving to death. Even in the wilderness, they could identify the size and species of animals based on their footprints. With such ability, Sulen naturally wouldn't let it go. Therefore, the Northern Town Army included wilderness survival training. If someone from the previous world saw this, they would instantly understand that Sulen was planning to train all the soldiers according to the requirements of the special forces. The construction of the camp was very fast. At the same time, smoke rose from the kitchen. The soldiers took out the dry food they had prepared and poured it into the pot. Then they added some wild vegetables and mushrooms. Soon, the aroma of the food filled the air. Just as everyone was about to eat, a scream suddenly came. Sulen didn't even think. His body turned into a shadow and rushed over. Chapter 235. A blood-curdling scream was heard, but it stopped abruptly. Sulen turned into a blur and rushed out. The other soldiers followed closely behind him. Everyone held their weapons. No one dared to be careless. Sulen soon arrived at the scene. However, what he found made Sulen frown. My lord! A new spearman recruit had a frightened expression and his body was trembling. Beside him was the corpse of another spearman. However, only half of the spearman's corpse was left with blood. What happened? Where is the murderer? Sulen looked around and did not find any monsters. Carl was eaten by that flower. The spearman soldier stammered. Sulen looked at the corpse in front of him. There were some irregular teeth marks on the corpse. The corpse was badly mutilated. It looked like the upper half of the body had been swallowed. Even the iron-plated armor on the body was torn apart. Flower? What flower? The soldier, who had just joined the army not long ago, was so frightened that he stuttered. Took him a while to calm down. Carl and I came here to pick mushrooms and wild vegetables. We were going back to cook. Carl saw a patch of mushrooms under the tree and was about to pick them. But as soon as we walked over, a strange flower beside us suddenly opened its big mouth. We didn't even have time to react. Carl was swallowed. I reached out and tried to pull him over, but only his lower half was pulled back. The soldier was nervous. He pointed at a strange plant not far away. His face was pale. It was obvious that he was greatly frightened. Sulen glanced at the plant. It was a plant similar to a sunflower. However, the color of the flower was blood red. The color was unusually bright. The stem of the sunflower looked like a cloth bag. There was also a pool of blood near the plant that had not dried up. Sunwheel flower? Sulen's face darkened when he saw the plant in front of him. Sulen had seen this type of plant in Hathaway's Monster Guide. It was a type of mutated plant. It did not rely on photosynthesis to grow like normal plants. Instead, it devoured all kinds of animals and humans. This type of plant could also move on its own, but at a very slow speed. Sunflower? Mutated plant. Man-eating flower? Grade 3. Gregarious. Creature level, 13. Challenge rating, level 8. Has spell-like ability. Strength, 16. Agility, 6. Spirit, 23. Vitality, 21. Charm, 15 talents. Camouflage, sneak attack, perception, intermediate regeneration, decoy skills. Devouring attack, vine tentacles, hallucinatory fragrance, poison attack difficulty. C+ sunwheel flower was a type of mutated plant. This type of plant was the most dangerous type of man-eating plant. Could be found all over the continent. There were many types of mutated plants that could attack, such as snake vines, bloody thorns, caraman's trees, and so on. These types of plants would actively attack the animals around them. These types of plants had evolved from normal plants and had all kinds of terrifying spell-like abilities. For example, snake vines could bite and entangle their prey like poisonous snakes and release poison. Sir, at this time, the soldiers of the northern battlefront city arrived. Sulen ordered them. There are man-eating plants here. Don't get close to them. Everyone be alert. Don't be ambushed. Man-eating plants? Hearing Sulen's words, the soldiers immediately became nervous. They looked around the plants and scanned the area. Kate looked at the body on the ground with a grim expression. Sir, what kind of plant is this? It swallowed a person in one bite. As a hero that Sulen had discovered from the army, Kate's strength was not outstanding. However, he had sharp instincts on the battlefield and was very suitable to be a commander. Sunwheel flower. Su Luen uttered a name. Sir, how do we deal with these plants? Why don't we just set this place on fire and burn it all down? Kate whispered. We brought some kerosene this time. It shouldn't be a problem to set this forest on fire. The surrounding forest was so quiet that it made people's hearts palpitate. The forest in front of him gave him a very dangerous feeling. Sulen shook his head. It's useless. These plants are very resistant to fire. Their roots are underground. If you want to burn them, you'll need a lot of kerosene. Sunwheel flower's ability was not only to ambush and swallow people, but also its fragrance. This kind of plant's fragrance had a very strong hallucinogenic ability. It could make people fall into hallucinations unknowingly and then be controlled by the plant. Sometimes, the number of people was not an advantage for this kind of plant. Sulen flipped his palm and a sharp sword appeared in his hand. He then moved his body and rushed toward the sunwheel flower. This kind of man-eating plant had a special characteristic, which was that it would become very lazy when digesting its prey after swallowing. At this time, as long as they didn't attack, they wouldn't attack again under normal circumstances. Moreover, when they were digesting food, the reaction of these man-eating plants would also be reduced. Experienced adventurers would prepare some cattle, sheep, and other animals for them to devour. When they were full, they would suddenly attack. As a grade 3 plant, they were very strong. Although they were only rated C+ in the monster guide, if you were careless, the consequences would be unforgettable. No, there might not be a future. This kind of plant's rating was because they had very obvious weaknesses. As long as you knew their weaknesses and made a corresponding attack plan based on their weaknesses, there were still many ways to deal with them. However, as plants, they had one thing in common. Their most fatal weakness was the underground part. Su Len tiptoed and quickly rose up. The sharp sword in his hand slashed toward the sunwheel flower in front of him. The flower-shaped parts on the surface of the man-eating plant were its feeding and digestive organs. The bulging thing that looked like a bag was the body of the Northtown City soldier. As Su Len expected, when Su Len attacked, the sunwheel flower's reaction was much slower. When Sullen's sword stabbed into the stem, the sunwheel flower suddenly attacked. A large number of vines shot out from the ground. Sullen's sharp sword cut horizontally. It was a plant, but it felt like cutting rubber with a knife. The vines broke, and bright red liquid flowed out of the cracks. It looked like blood. These vines were very strong. Although they had been cut off, they kept twisting after falling to the ground. It felt like the tentacles of an octopus were cut off. Whoosh! At this moment, the huge mouth that looked like a sunflower suddenly opened. The huge mouth opened ferociously. Inside the huge petals of the sunwheel flower, there were densely packed dagger-like teeth. If you were bitten by these teeth, you would immediately be torn into pieces. Inside the petals, there were things like blood vessels. Those were channels used to transport nutrients. At this time, the body of the soldier inside was already beyond recognition. At the same time, a bloody smell came, mixed with the smell of acid. It was the digestive fluid secreted by plants to digest their prey. Su Len stabbed a few times, causing some damage to the petals. However, these were not fatal. At the same time, a large number of root-like things suddenly broke out of the ground and surrounded Su Len. Sword skill. Sweep sword skill. Cut iron. 2 streaks of sword light shot out from the sword. The power of the sword light was so great that it directly cut the surrounding plant roots into 2. The roots were cut off, causing severe pain to the sunwheel flower. The sunwheel flower's mouth also involuntarily twisted. Then, the huge petals suddenly opened like a bloody mouth and bit Su Len. However, although it was fast, it was far from enough compared to Su Len. How could it be bitten? He slid left and twisted his body. Not only did he avoid the sunwheel flower's attack, but he also took the opportunity to backhand the sunwheel flower's roots. The roots, which were as tough as dragon skin, were not cut off. Su Len moved quickly. He did not withdraw the sword in his hand. Instead, he followed the trace and cut directly. Faced with high-speed cutting, the sunwheel flower's tough roots could no longer withstand it. The ferocious mouth was directly cut off. Even so, the sunwheel flower's mouth did not show any signs of death. Instead, it kept twisting and struggling on the ground. Immediately afterward, a large number of roots broke out of the ground and madly besieged Su Luen. These roots directly formed a circle, encircling Su Luen in the middle, and then wrapped around him in an instant. There were also many barbs on these roots. If one was wrapped around by them, they would definitely be torn into countless pieces. Thunderstorm spell. Strong lightning burst out from Sullen's body. As the power of lightning was the most likely to trigger negative effects, under such dense lightning, all the sunwheel flower's roots trembled in an instant. Many of the roots were directly electrocuted into charcoal. The strong electric current flowed along the roots into the sunwheel flower's underground part. Even the sunwheel flower's underground part was constantly trembling from the electric current. Not far away, there was a bulge on the ground that was neither big nor small. Seeing this, Su Luen's eyes flashed with lightning. Lightning spear. powerful lightning gathered in Sullen's hand in an instant, forming a spear completely made of lightning. Then he waved his arm. The lightning spear instantly pierced the air, then pierced the soil and instantly sank into the bulge. A muffled sound of thunder came from the ground under his feet, like winter thunder. Then, the trembling roots on the ground instantly lost their support and fell down one after another. A large amount of lightning jumped back and forth on the ground, and it took a few seconds for it to slowly dissipate. Chapter 236. Ding! Congratulations to the host. You have slain a rank 3 mutant sunflower. You have gained 2,350 experience points. Sulen heaved a sigh of relief when he heard the system notification. The sunflower was not much of a threat to Sulen. What was more troublesome was that its weak point was underground. It would not be easy to kill it. "My lord, are you all right?" Kite asked when he saw that the battle was over. Sulen shook his head. "I'm fine. Take your men and dig out the roots of the sunflower." "Yes, my lord." Kite immediately obeyed and led dozens of soldiers to dig along the roots of the sunflower. Apart from some spearmen who were about to be promoted to the Spear Imperial Guard, the rest of the soldiers were elite spearmen. The expansion of the army required them to participate in several battles to be promoted as soon as possible. While the soldiers were digging, Su Luin took a knife and began to deal with the sunflower's mouthpart. At this time, the ferocious mouthpart had lost its vitality and was lying softly on the ground. Although it looked ferocious and horrible, its pollen was a good magic material. Hallucinogenic pollen could be used to make hallucinogenic potions. It was also added to many potions, such as the Azure Potion. It was a potion used to increase the will of the user. After taking it, the user would see a lot of illusions. The user had to get rid of all the illusions in order to increase the will of the user. It would increase the user's will by about 1 or 2 points. Originally, Su Luin didn't know much about these materials. It was Hathaway who forced him to write them down, so that he wouldn't miss them if he didn't know what they were. Su Len took a small knife and was about to cut the sunflower's mouthpart. However, as soon as the knife came close, the sunflower, which had no signs of life, bit at Su Len. However, Su Luin was already prepared for this situation. He flipped his palm and a thunderball instantly appeared in his hand. Then, the thunderball collided with the sunwheel flower's mouth, and a powerful thunder power instantly erupted. The sunflower's mouthpart kept trembling and twitching. In the end, it stopped moving. The sunflower's mouthpart was similar to that of a poisonous snake. Even if it was dead, its head would still attack people who came close. After the lightning attack, the sunflower's mouthpart was completely dead. Su Len then started to collect the pollen. Although the sunflower looked like a flower, it was not. Its pollen was in a pouch above its mouthpart. Su Len searched for a while and cut open the sunflower's mouthpart. He found a pouch the size of a fist on the wall. It contained the sunflower's hallucinogenic pollen. After finding the pollen, the rest of the mouthpart was cut open. The corpse of the Northtown City soldier that had turned into chunks of flesh was taken out too. Even though it was beyond recognition, the Northtown City would cremate the body into ashes and bury it in the Cemetery of Martyrs, as he had died in the battle. Although it was time-consuming, it was very important for the soldiers. It also gave the Northtown City soldiers a belief that other armies did not have. In this era, the dead soldiers would be buried on the spot. If they were lucky, they would leave a tombstone. If they were unlucky, there would be nothing left. Moreover, the death pensions of the soldiers were often embezzled. Of course, most of the time, there was no pension at all. Only after winning a battle would the nobles be merciful and take out an extremely small portion of the spoils of war as pension. It was different in the Northtown City. All the soldiers who died in the battle would receive a pension. If they made contributions, the pension would be more. Normally, the Northtown City's pension would be 5 times the annual salary of the soldier, and it would be paid in one lump sum. The payment of the pension was very strict, and Su Luin kept a close eye on it. He didn't want the pension not to fall into the hands of the soldiers' relatives, but to be pocketed by others. Once such a scandal occurred, It would be a great blow to the reputation of Northern Town. Apart from the pension, the North Town city also treated the families of the martyrs well. For example, the families of the martyrs would not have to pay taxes on their land for 10 years. At the same time, the orphans of the martyrs would be accepted into the school under construction in the North Town city. At the same time, the city hall would send officials to the families of the martyrs every year. The North Town City Army was the most loyal army in the world. The soldiers moved quickly. The root of the sunwheel flower was slowly exposed under the digging. Although Su Len already knew that the sunwheel flower had a large part underground, he was still shocked. The mouth of the sunwheel flower above the ground was only 1/5 of the mouth of the sunwheel flower underground. As the soil was constantly cleaned, the roots of the sunwheel flower were soon exposed. In the center of the roots of the sunwheel flower was a huge sarcoma, which was the vital part of the sunwheel flower. There was a huge hole in the sarcoma-like thing, and the blood inside had already dried up. However, Su Len did not care about that. Instead, he began to look for something on the sarcoma-like thing. Soon, Su Len found an egg-sized red gemstone. It was the most valuable part of the sunwheel flower. Wizards called it the blood essence stone. The stone itself was poisonous. It could cause paralysis and hallucinations. As long as the poison was neutralized, it could be used to make a potion that could permanently increase one's lifespan. A single sunwheel flower could increase a person's lifespan by 10 to 15 years. This was why it was so valuable in the black market. As soon as it appeared, it would be snatched up immediately. Although this world was a fantasy world, for those below the legendary level, their lifespan was still an insurmountable problem. As long as they reached the legendary level, even a warrior could live up to 200 to 300 years old. Wizards could even live up to 1,000 years. However, most of the legendary warriors did not live to 300 years old. As warriors who fought on the front lines, every one of them had fought their way through mountains of corpses and seas of blood. Injuries were nothing out of the ordinary. However, if they were injured too much when they were young, their lifespan would be affected. The blood essence stone had no effect on legendary wizards. They had better treasures like the fountain of youth, water of life, and other miraculous items that could greatly increase one's lifespan. However, for nobles, this kind of life-extending potion was very tempting. After all, not many nobles would think that their lifespan was too long. This kind of potion was not very useful to Su Len. Although he was also a warrior, he was also a wizard. When he reached the legendary level, he had awakened his domain power. Even if he lived according to his normal lifespan, he would still live longer than legendary wizards. Su Len did not plan to use it himself. Instead, he planned to let Hathaway make the potion and sell it. If this thing appeared in the auction house, he was sure that the nobles would give him a satisfactory price. After putting away the blood essence stone, Su Luen ordered the soldiers to burn the roots of the sunwheel flower and then ordered the army to withdraw from the forest. If there were more mutant plants similar to the sunwheel flower in the forest, these soldiers would not be able to do much. Therefore, he planned to explore alone. After ordering Kate to defend the camp, Su Len entered the forest alone. This forest was very strange. There were not even many insects. Although the plants looked lush, there was a sense of eeriness. At this time, it was already a little dark, and the light in the forest was even worse. Su Luen blessed himself with an invisibility spell, and then went around from the side. As he passed through the thorny forest, there were many strange trees and flowers around him. Their bodies were obviously larger than ordinary plants, a bit like an ancient primitive forest. Su Luen deliberately touched these plants a few times with something, and the whole plant moved a little, but these plants did not attack. Maybe these plants did not need to eat yet. Su Luen even found a plant similar to a willow tree. The plant had many vines that swayed with the wind. It looked normal, but Su Luen, who had read the monster guide, recognized it at a glance. It was a Caroman's tree. When this plant did not attack, it was no different from a normal plant. However, when it attacked, its numerous vines would immediately wrap around the target like snakes. It would also secrete a large amount of hallucinogenic and paralyzing liquid to paralyze the target. At the same time, it would also inject digestive fluid into the target. The organs and even the bones of the target would melt into liquid and be absorbed by the Cromans tree. Although this plant was ferocious, it was a very good material for wizards. Wizards would often deliberately plant this kind of thing. The Cromans tree trunk was very magical, and it was a good material for making magic staffs. The hallucinogenic fluid it secreted was also a supplementary material for some magic potions. Sulen looked at the Cromans tree in front of him and frowned. He muttered, "A Cromans tree? Is it wild or planted here on purpose?" After hesitating for a while, Sulen did not attack the tree. Instead, he carefully went around it. After going around the Cromans tree, Sulen continued to go deeper into the forest. Soon, a large field of lavender flowers appeared in front of him. After quietly approaching, Sulen realized that this field of flowers did not seem to grow naturally. Instead, it seemed to be artificially cultivated. Although the flowers were not trimmed, he could still see some traces left behind. After getting closer, Sulen also recognized the flowers planted in this field of flowers. These purple flowers were all datura flowers. Sulen felt that these flowers were alive. Chapter 237. Tulips? That's not right. Why are tulips purple? Seeing such a large sea of flowers, Sulen's brows wrinkled. Who would plant tulips here? Ordinary tulips alone were not fatal, but they emitted a special kind of poison. People who stayed in this sea of flowers for a while would be poisoned. They would feel dizzy and nauseous. If they did not leave in time, they would fall into a coma and become fertilizer for this sea of flowers. The purple tulips in front of him were obviously not ordinary. If Sulen guessed correctly, their poison was stronger and more violent. Although this sea of flowers was luxuriant, it seemed that no one had taken care of it for a long time. Sulen found a lot of things like flower seeds on the ground near the sea of flowers. It should be for some reason that these flower seeds did not take root and germinate. In some places, the growth of the flowers was obviously messy. Sulen also found that behind this sea of flowers, he could vaguely see the outline of some broken buildings. However, it should be because the weathering was too severe. It was impossible to distinguish their original appearance. Sulen's heart became more and more excited. It was obvious that this was a ruin that had not been excavated. Sulen observed for a while and did not find the entrance of the ruin. However, this was a normal phenomenon. Not all ruins had an entrance. Some ruins that were severely damaged only had some broken walls. Many ruins were actually excavated by various adventurer teams. Of course, there were still many dangers in these ruins. Sulen did not act rashly. However, just as he was about to return, he suddenly saw that the weathered wall at the edge of the sea of flowers was a little different. Sulen carefully avoided these plants and observed from the side. Spatial folds? Sulen's expression was a little surprised. The abnormality looked like a piece of paper that had been wrinkled from the side. It looked very strange. Is this the wizard's secret realm? Sulen suddenly thought of a possibility. Thinking of this, Sulen felt that his guess was correct. However, to be sure, he still needed a professional to take a look. Sulen did not continue to move. The secret realm of sorcerers was a masterpiece of the ancient sorcerers. Those ancient sorcerers were well versed in the knowledge of space, planes, and other things. After some research, they created a kind of magical technology. During the period of the Arcane Empire, the technology of the wizard's secret realm was developed to its peak. Some powerful wizards even opened up a plane as their own territory. There were also wizards who found a half-plane in the astral world and linked it to the main material world. Secret realms also varied in size. The first secret realms used spatial magic to hide some areas of the prime material plane. These kinds of secret realms were the most common, and the space inside was also the smallest. As for secret realms that used semiplanes or entire planes to transform them, they were now very rare. Moreover, it was very likely that there were ancient and dangerous creatures in the secret realm. There might even be all sorts of magical traps. If he wasn't prepared, it was very likely that he would fail miserably. Some secret realms even had magical pets or magical beasts left behind by the ancient adepts. It was important to know that some magical beasts had a very long lifespan, and many magical beasts would use a long period of dormancy to delay the aging of life. Who knew if there were such monsters in the secret realms that had been closed for thousands of years or even longer? If they were unlucky, there might be a giant dragon. Even if it was the weakest white dragon among the 5-colored dragons, thousands of years was enough for it to grow into an ancient dragon. In the face of a giant dragon of this level, the average legendary strongman would be a piece of cake. After a round of investigation, Su Len returned to the camp outside the forest. At this time, Carter had almost built the camp. When Su Len returned to the camp, he immediately sent someone back to inform Hathaway to come as soon as possible. After suspecting that there was a secret realm here, Su Len began to block the news. Once the news about the appearance of the secret realm of sorcerers spread, all the sorcerers on the continent would come back to explore. At that time, even Su Len would be powerless to stop it. Although he was now a legendary strongman, there were many legendary strongmen on the continent. A secret realm that had never been discovered. The resources in it were enough to make these legendary strongmen excited. In a moment, all the soldiers were sent out to clear the monsters in the wasteland. No monsters or people were allowed to come close to the forest. After waiting in the camp for a day, Su Len saw Hathaway rushing over the next day. "Where is the secret realm? Take me there quickly." Hathaway saw Su Len and did not have time to rest. She immediately asked about the secret realm. "The secret realm will always be there. It won't run away. Calm down first." Seeing Hathaway's state, Su Len had to force her to calm down. She was not suitable to explore the ruins in her current state. After hearing Sullen's advice, Hathaway finally calmed down and began to rest. At the same time, she prepared various items for the exploration. It was not until the third day that Su Len brought Hathaway to the thorn forest. The two quickly arrived at the place where Su Len killed the sunwheel flower. After arriving, Hathaway began to cast various spells on them. Invisibility, hide tracks, eliminate scent, energy shield, elemental resistance, poison resistance, bear's endurance, cat's grace. A series of support spells were released from Hathaway's hands. Su Len could clearly feel that his strength had increased by a notch. Hathaway, who was already a third-rank wizard, had no problem casting these spells. The two then followed the path that Su Len took last time and went deep into the forest. As soon as they entered, Hathaway quickly noticed the difference. This is the moon soul grass. This is the blood-sucking thorn. This is the ghost flower. The plants that Su Len did not recognize last time were easily recognized by Hathaway. She was very excited. "There are so many magical plants here," Hathaway said excitedly. "There was nothing strange about this forest before. I don't know what happened, but there was a sudden change recently," Su Len said as he walked. This place was not too far away from Northgard City. It was about 50 kilometers. In the past, nothing strange had happened here. It had only appeared in the past 1 or 2 months. Hathaway thought for a moment and said, "I think it has something to do with the elemental tide." "This place has something to do with the elemental tide?" Sullen's eyes widened. Hathaway ran her fingers through her hair and said, "Yes, the elemental tide." The eruption of the elemental tide was a bit sudden. According to what you said, this mystery plane has not been repaired for at least 1 or 2,000 years. The sudden surge of elemental energy has caused problems with the operation of the energy nodes in the mystery plane. The energy core might have been damaged due to years of disrepair. The spatial array covering the secret realm also showed some flaws because of this. Then, the demonic plants, flower fields, and other plants that were originally in the secret realm were exposed. You should be able to feel it. The elemental energy in this forest is very dense. It's much denser than the other places outside. I suspect that the mystery plane was exposed because of the sudden increase in elemental energy due to the appearance of the elemental tide. The energy transmission system in the mystery plane could not withstand the sudden increase in elemental energy. Looks like we have the elemental tide to thank, Sulen said with a smile. Don't be happy too early. Although the mystery plane has appeared, it's not easy to go in and get the benefits. None of the ruins left behind by the ancient wizards are easy to deal with. The best equipment for exploring a mystery plane was to have a lucky companion. Under normal circumstances, it would be a halfling rogue. Halfling rogues were very popular in exploration because of their short stature, flexible bodies, keen intuition, and generally better luck than the average person. It would be even better if they had attributes similar to the treasure-hunting mouse. Soon, the two arrived at the sea of flowers that Sulen found last time. The purple sea of flowers swayed with the wind, looking like a purple ocean. So many purple tulips. Hathaway was very surprised when she saw the sea of flowers in front of her. These tulips give me the feeling that they are alive, Sulen said. Hathaway nodded and said, They are indeed alive. These are activated plants. These activated plants are generally the outer layer of the mystery plane, and the fruits they produce after they mature are also materials for refining magic potions. Also, don't you think this sea of flowers is very beautiful? It's like a fish eating 3 fish, Sulen said. Then how do we get in? There's no good way. We can only force our way in. And even if we know the password to pass through here, these magical plants have changed several times. It's a problem whether the password is still valid. After all this time, we still have to force it. Sulen rolled up his sleeves and was ready to do it. Don't do that. Seeing that Sulen was about to do it, Hathaway immediately pulled him back. I've already checked just now. The runic magic circle here has basically lost its effect. These tulips will only attack based on instinct. This way, it'll be much easier. If the original runic magic circle was still there, these tulips would be equivalent to 1. At that time, it would naturally be difficult to deal with. After Sulen and Hathaway cast a defensive spell, they entered the sea of flowers. As soon as they entered, Sulen smelled a strong floral fragrance, and a faint singing sound appeared in his ears. The tulips in the sea of flowers drifted with the wind, and the surrounding branches and leaves were like sharp blades that quickly cut the two of them. The energy shield in front of the two of them frequently collided with each other. The energy shield firmly blocked all these attacks, but the system's prompt kept ringing in his ears. The host is attacked by the knockout fragrance, forcibly conducting a constitution test. Constitution test passed. The host is attacked by the mind, forcibly conducting a spirit test. Spirit test passed. Chapter 238. Sulen's body was already tall, and with Hathaway's support, the attacks launched by the surrounding purple tulips didn't pose too much of a threat to the two. Sulen brandished his sword and kept cutting off the branches and leaves of the purple tulips. After being attacked, the attacks of the purple tulips weakened a lot. Hathaway took out a small pouch and grabbed some powder from it. She chanted some incantation and scattered the powder. The purple tulips that were still attacking the two suddenly slowed down. After a while, the attacks completely disappeared. The surrounding purple tulips were like drunkards, swaying and not moving. What is this? Sulen's eyes lit up. This is hypnotic powder. All right, let's leave quickly. Plants have a high resistance to hypnosis. They will wake up soon, Hathaway urged. Sulen nodded, then pulled Hathaway and quickly walked towards the depths of the sea of flowers. Along the way, Hathaway kept sprinkling hypnotic powder on the surrounding purple tulips. Soon, the two passed through the sea of flowers. Behind the sea of flowers were some buildings that had been severely weathered. These buildings should have been heavily damaged. There were still some traces left on the ruins. Sulen found some wrinkles on the wall nearby. Sulen went over to take a look, but there was nothing special. It should be just an ordinary spatial wrinkle. After arriving here, the two didn't rush forward. Instead, they first searched the ruins. They didn't know if it was because the destruction was too thorough, but there was nothing valuable here. After finding nothing, the two began to enter the depths of the ruins. After arriving here, Sulen clearly felt that the space here was a bit strange. There was a strange membrane separating them from the outside world. After entering the secret realm, there were a lot more buildings inside, and many of them were relatively well preserved. Be careful. Although it seems that no one has been here for a long time, some runic magic circles are still operating normally. Don't touch their defense mechanism, Hathaway said after observing for a while. Sulen nodded gently, then asked, Hathaway, can you tell what period this secret realm is from? Looking at the style of these buildings, some of them seem to be from the later period of the Arcane Kingdom. However, the secret realms of the later period of the Arcane Kingdom are generally based on half-bit walls or artificial bit walls. Secret realms like this that fold space directly are rarely used. The difficulty of building a secret realm that uses this kind of space-folding technology is much lower, and the value inside will be much lower, so you have to be mentally prepared. But it's not without benefits. If the level of the ruins is low, the level of danger inside will naturally be low. Even if we find those secret realms made by semi-planes or even planes, we can only look at them. Secret realms of that level are very dangerous. Hathaway, do you know how to use the space folding technology? How about we also build a secret realm in North Town? Sulen looked at the secret realm in front of him and said, the technology of creating a secret realm has been lost. Maybe some large wizard schools still have it. Our school doesn't have the information about the construction of a secret realm. Moreover, it costs an astronomical amount of money and resources to build a secret realm. Hathaway shook her head and said, then see if you can try to control this secret realm. This secret realm doesn't look small, and the degree of damage isn't too high. It would be better if it can be repaired. I'll try. Hathaway looked at the secret realm. She was also very interested in it. Sulen looked around, then walked to a relatively intact building not far away. The materials used in these buildings looked very ordinary, but after so many years they were still not completely damaged. It was obvious that the hardening spell had been cast on them. Sulen gently pushed the door open. A huge cloud of dust flew into the air. He quickly took a step back and summoned a wind elemental to sweep the dust away. The house was empty. Aside from a pile of decaying furniture, there was nothing else. There were no monsters or corpses inside, either. Just as Su Luin was about to turn around and leave, he suddenly seemed to have discovered something. He went directly to one of the walls, reached out and gently knocked on it a few times. A hollow sound came from the wall. There's something in there. Su Luin's eyes lit up. He immediately picked up the long sword and stabbed it into the wall. Then, with a gentle stroke, the wall was pried open. There was a hole in the wall and there was a small locked box in it. Sulen picked up the box and looked at it. He then signaled Hathaway to step back while he took out a wire to pry open the lock. Sulen had done this kind of job many times before. After all, he often went over walls to pry open locks. He talked about life with the noble ladies and young ladies and imparted his knowledge to them. His lockpicking skills had long been practiced to first class. Some of the old thieves were not as good as him. Not only was he good at picking locks, but he was also very good at picking the heart locks of the noble ladies and young ladies. He used to be the guardian knight of several young ladies. It's locked. Let me open it, Sulen said confidently. Kacha! Kacha! After a while, Sulen fiddled with the wire back and forth in the lock cylinder, but the lock could not be opened. Sulen felt a thin layer of sweat on his head. What's going on? Are the locks of the Arcane Empire so powerful? Kacha! There was a soft sound. The lock on the box had been broken by Sulen. It turned out that this kind of thing had been stored for thousands of years, and the internal structure had long rusted away. Sulen inadvertently used too much force and broke the lock directly. After opening the box, Sulen did not open it immediately. This kind of box was generally set with a magic trap. Once it was opened, it would suddenly spray out effects such as strong acid, crossbow arrows, lightning, poisonous smoke, and so on. This kind of trap was impossible to guard against, so it was not wrong to be cautious. He put the box on the ground and carefully opened it. Sulen's body tensed up, and he was ready to dodge at any time without triggering any mechanism. Just as Su Len was about to relax, a flash of light came, followed by an acid arrow that was not as thick as a finger. Sulen's body flashed and he easily dodged it. The acid arrow flew less than 20 centimeters and fell to the ground weakly. A normal acid arrow was more than 10 times stronger than this one, and it could fly very far. However, considering that this trap had been there for so long, it could still be activated. This in itself showed that the person who set the trap was very skilled. After dodging the acid arrow, Su Len picked up the box. There was not much in the box, only a few colorful gems. There was a ruby and a sapphire that were the size of a pigeon's egg and of good quality. There was also a crystal bottle beside it, but the liquid in the bottle had long dried up, leaving only some brown powder at the bottom. "Here you go." Su Len handed the ruby and sapphire to Hathaway. Hathaway reached out and took the gems. Her beautiful big eyes were smiling like crescent moons. She took out a handkerchief and wiped the gems clean, then put them away with a smile. Sure enough, women were like dragons, unable to resist the temptation of these shiny gems. With the first building's facade already having such a harvest, the two's interest in treasure hunting was even higher. Following that, the dozen or so buildings that were still intact were all swept clean. Even the walls and floors were searched, but their harvest was not much. They only found a well-preserved magic scroll in one of the rooms. There were 5 hexagram symbols on the left side of this magic scroll, indicating that this magic scroll recorded a level 5 spell. A level 5 spell was still very valuable. If bought from a wizard, it would cost about 300 to 500 kinner. He handed the magic scroll to Hathaway. Hathaway opened the scroll and looked at it, but after a few glances, Hathaway frowned. There were many runes on this level 5 spell that she had never seen before, and the runes on it were even more complicated than a level 6 spell. Although she did not recognize this magic scroll, it did not mean that she could not learn it. As long as she learned these new runes and released them, she would be able to master this spell. The only problem was that it would be more difficult to learn. After harvesting 2 gems and a level 5 spell scroll, Su Len and Selena left the ruins of the building and continued to go deeper into the secret realm. Soon, the two arrived near a farmland. At this time, the farmland had long been deserted, and only some plants grew sporadically in some places. After getting closer, Hathaway's eyes lit up. She immediately recognized that these were all magical plants. However, there was a layer of runic circle outside the farmland. Seeing this situation, Su Len and Hathaway directly used brute force to break it. Fortunately, the runic circle had not been maintained for a long time, and its power had dropped to the extreme. Hathaway hit it with a fireball, and the runic circle kept flickering. After a few consecutive fireballs, finally, with a soft sound, the runic circle flickered a few times and dimmed completely. Without the runic circle, Su Len and Selena entered the farmland. This farmland should have been used to grow all kinds of magical plants. Later, maybe because of war or other reasons, all the magical plants here were harvested. Those magical plants that were still growing now should be the seeds that accidentally fell during the harvest. These seeds later took root and grew in the farmland. The farmland in front of them covered a vast area of hundreds of acres. Some magical plants grew sporadically in it. Su Len and Hathaway did not continue to explore the ruins and left to harvest these magical plants. Although there were not many of these magical plants, their quality was very high. They had been growing for at least a few hundred years. Many of them were even almost extinct now. Chapter 239. Around these farms, Su Len also found some broken crystal pillars with many runes engraved on them. After careful identification, Hathaway found that the runes engraved on them were used for scouting, monitoring, and changing the surrounding environment. In the era of the Arcane Empire, the Arcanist could use spells to monitor the growth of the magic plants at all times, and change the surrounding growth environment according to the needs of the magic plants. Su Luen even suspected that this work didn't need anyone to intervene. Under these crystal pillars, Su Len also found energy channels used to transmit magical energy. However, many of the channels were broken, and the energy inside was almost dry. Intruders detected. Intruders detected. Counterattack triggered. Eliminate the intruders. Body recharging. Insufficient energy. Activating reserve energy. Activating reserve energy. Activating counterattack. Mission instruction. Eliminate the intruders. The cold mechanical voice suddenly sounded. A ray of light swept across a well-preserved crystal pillar next to them, followed by the sound of heavy footsteps. In the distance, a faint red light lit up in the gray fog, and some tall black shadows walked out of the fog. It was a few tall, fully constructed puppets. These fully constructed puppets were different from the ones that were popular among the wizards. They were painted in black and had a metallic luster, giving them a heavy feeling. Steel golems. Seeing the fully constructed puppets in front of him, Su-Len recognized them at a glance. The leading steel golem gave Su-Len a feeling that it was very similar to the original version of Iron Man's armor in his previous life. One or two of the steel golems were damaged, which should be the traces of a battle. Target found. Attack! After finding Su-Len and Hathaway, the leading steel golem instantly aimed its arm at the two of them. Then, its palms separated, and a black hole appeared in front of them. A burst of energy instantly burst out. Sullen's expression changed. Without thinking, he pulled Hathaway aside and dodged. Boom! Boom! A few consecutive energy blasts hit the place where the two of them were standing just now. A 4 or 5 meter deep crater was blasted out of the ground, and a mushroom cloud rose in the explosion. F***CK. So powerful. Su-Len sucked in a breath of cold air when he saw the craters on the ground. Then global warming. Every single one of these magic golems was more powerful than a great fireball, and if they fired continuously, they would be able to bombard the ground. This kind of magic golems could easily wipe out an entire army. Lightning spear. A spear made entirely of lightning appeared in Sullen's hand. In the next second, the lightning spear streaked across the sky and instantly hit the steel golem at the front. The powerful lightning energy melted the steel golem's chest into molten iron, and a large amount of lightning energy instantly burst out. The entire steel golem was covered in lightning. The steel golem's red eyes flickered back and forth a few times before slowly extinguishing. The steel golem that weighed several tons crashed to the ground. The other steel golems turned their arms and fired their energy cannons at the two of them. High-risk target detected. Prioritize high-risk target. The remaining steel golems all aimed at Su-Len and fired energy cannons one after another. Seeing this situation, Hathaway's hands flickered and released spells one after another. Slow. Energy shield. Haste. Chain of fireballs. A flash of light enveloped the steel golems, and the already somewhat slow steel golems became even slower. A translucent energy shield rose from Sullen's body, and his already fast speed increased again. 5 fireballs appeared next to Hathaway. In the next second, these fireballs drew an arc and hit 3 steel golems. The flash of light dissipated, and to the two of them's surprise, the golems were actually unharmed, only a little damaged on the surface of their steel. What a high magic defense! Su-Len slid, his figure flashed, and went around the golem from the side. Then, he took a big stride forward and slashed at the golem's leg joint with the sharp sword in his hand. Clang! The sound of metal clashing rang out. The steel golem's body shook slightly, and a deep sword mark appeared on its leg joint. Sullen's feet moved quickly, and he dodged the steel golem's sweep. In the next second, his body had already turned to the other side. At the same time, the sharp sword in his hand didn't stop at all, and he kept slashing at the steel golem's leg. Sparks flew, and soon, the steel golem's leg joint became scarred. Crack! With a soft sound, the already scarred joint could no longer withstand the attack and suddenly broke. The steel golem that had lost a leg could no longer maintain its balance, and its heavy body fell to the ground with a bang. Freezing beam. 3 Hathaway took advantage of the moment when Su-Len was fighting with the golem and quickly summoned 3 icy blue rays. The blue rays instantly hit the 3 steel golems, and the steel golems, which had already been slowed down by the slow spell, became even slower. Su Len didn't let go of the opportunity. With a sweep of the sword in his hand, he cut off the leg joints of the 3 steel golems. After losing the ability to move, these steel golems all became targets. Soon, Su Len easily cut off their energy centers. After losing the energy centers, the red eyes of the steel golems flickered a few times and slowly extinguished. Su Len breathed a long sigh of relief and threw away the long sword in his hand that had turned into a sawtooth. Damn, these golems are really hard. Next time, I must change to a better weapon. Without a suitable weapon, this thing is like dismantling a mech with bare hands. Hathaway, can you make these golems? My current alchemy level is not enough, and these steel golems from the Arcane Empire are more difficult to make than the ones that are circulating now. I need to take them back and disassemble them. Hathaway shook her head with a wry smile. The craftsmanship of these golems was much more powerful than the steel golems in her school. Su Len got up and came near these steel golems. Then, he found the best preserved and lightest damaged steel golems and put them away with the storage parachute. As for the other golems, they could only be left here now. Although Sullen's storage space was large, it was very difficult to fit one in. The steel golems in front of him were basically identical in appearance. They were not the products of handmade workshops at all. Su Len suspected that these steel golems were like the products of an assembly line. The challenge rating of these steel golems was about level 13. Su Len could solve them so easily. Part of the reason was his own strength. The other part was that these golems lacked energy. Otherwise, these golems would have been attacking with energy balls. That kind of intensive energy cannon storm, even Su Len would have to temporarily avoid the spearhead. The two of them simply packed up their spoils of war and continued to walk deeper into the secret territory. After passing through the farmland, they soon saw a lake. The lake water was clear, but it was dead silent inside. After being sealed for such a long time, the ecology of the lake water had long been destroyed. After searching here for a while, Su Len only found a few lotus seeds in the soil. The lotus seeds were well preserved and should be able to germinate. Hathaway was going to go back and try to plant them. Bypassing the lake, a large number of buildings appeared in front of them. However, these buildings were seriously damaged. There were broken walls everywhere. Many of the buildings were directly erased, leaving only some large pits on the ground. Su Len picked up a piece of gravel and examined it. The gravel on the ground was all made of obsidian. The obsidian that was blessed with hard transformation was destroyed to this extent. It could be imagined how fierce the battle that took place here was. Although most of the buildings in the ruins were seriously damaged, the castle in the middle was still mostly preserved. After a simple search outside for a while, the two entered the castle. The castle was a mess. Several steel golems were scattered on the ground. These steel golems were seriously damaged. Many of them were rusted. Obviously, they had been scrapped. In addition to the steel golems, there was a large number of skeletons. However, after a long time, except for a few skeletons, most of the skeletons had become broken. In addition to human skeletons, there were many obviously thicker orc skeletons. There were also some skeletons that should be giants. Seeing the skeletons everywhere, Su Len could imagine how fierce the battle had been here. Bypassing these skeletons, Su Len walked into the castle. There were skeletons everywhere along the way. Su Len followed these skeletons. Su Len soon found the control center of this secret realm. In a well-preserved room in this castle, Su Len saw a place that looked like a control room. 6 thick metal pillars were engraved with a large number of runic magic circles. Next to this runic magic circle was a huge crystal curtain wall. However, this crystal curtain wall was now cracked into a spider web. Around this room, the battle was also the most intense. A large number of weapons were discarded on the ground. Su Len picked up a curved sword. The enchantment on the curved sword had lost its effect after thousands of years. Even the material had become rusty. Weapons of this level had lost their repair value. In the end, they could only be reforged. Most of the weapons here were in this state. Only a few high-level enchanted weapons still had some enchantment effect. However, if they wanted to continue using them, They had to find an alchemist master to repair them. Kacha! A noise came from the room, and an undead aura appeared. Skeletons swayed as they stood up. Su Luan glanced at them, but didn't pay them any attention. In this secret land that had been closed for thousands of years, and with so many people dead and injured, it was normal for some undead to be born. However, because of the environment, it was very difficult to produce high-level undead. Some low-level ghosts and skeletons were easily dealt with. You're tuning in to the Journey of the Soul YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.